Hi and welcome to Swedish Plantguys. In this video we will give you 8 different types of plants that in our experience works very good in low light conditions. And if you stay all the way to the end, we have a bonus tip for you. So before we start, we have to consider one thing. You have to know that there are no type of plants that likes or enjoys a low light placement. Know that all plants want a lot of light. But there are species and varieties of plant that can handle it and sometimes even thrive. So when you place a plant in a low light condition, know that there can be some issues. First of all, low light also means that it will not grow as fast. The reason is simple. Light is one of the things the plant needs to create its own food. This is called photosynthesis. You need light, you need carbon dioxide, and you need water. If you lower the light conditions, that means that the plant cannot be able to produce as much food as it would have if it had more light. This also means that it will not need as much water when you place it somewhere where it doesn't get as much light. Same thing, of course, when it comes to nutrients. If you have a plant that you're placed in a very dark spot in your home, know that it will not need as much nutrients as it would have if it were placed somewhere very light. So you might have to dilute the nutrients you give your plant if they are placed very dark. Also know that low light placement will mean that the plant will probably get a little bit thinner or leggier. This is because when it doesn't use as much water, it doesn't need to have as much of those small tubes where it transports the water inside of the plant. So when it grows, when new shoots grows or the existing branches continue to grow, they will become a little bit thinner. This is something you just have to live with. Another thing that can happen is that the leaves of the plant can turn very dark. It might not be an issue, but if you have a variegated plant that has different types of color on the leaves, know that some of those variegations will disappear when you place it where it doesn't get enough light. It doesn't mean that the plant will not survive, it only means that it might not look the way as it did when you bought it. Now the last thing I want to mention is that a plant that is placed in very low light can also be a little bit stressed from that. It can mean that it's more prone to get pests. So make sure to check your plants that are in low light placement a little bit more often than you are usually checking your other plants. So the first plant I want to show you is of course the dragon plant, the Dracaena Fragrance. And most of the varieties that are within the Dracaena Fragrance family, they can be placed very dark and still thrive. This is probably the most commonly used plant in offices around the world. And the reason is simple. It's an easy to care for plant that can be placed in very low light conditions. But know that we recommend that if you know you have a very dark placement, you should use the varieties that are completely green. This is for instance the Dracaena Janet Lind, which is an exceptional plant to have in low light conditions because it will thrive even though it doesn't get a lot of light. But if you have a Dracaena that is variegated, what could happen is that when you place it somewhere dark, it can lose the variegation on the leaves. This, however, is an exception. So if you want to place a Dracaena very dark, but you want that variegated color, the Dracaena Cinto is the one you should choose, because no matter how dark you place this plant, it will still be variegated. When you place your Dracaena in a dark spot, know that it will get a little bit leggy. The new growth from your Dracaena will be thinner. One way to remedy that is to prune it quite often. So our recommendation is that you prune it at least once a year. Try and prune it in spring when it gets the most amount of light and when you have the highest humidity indoors. That's a perfect way to prune it. But by pruning it, you will force it to grow out new shoots and it will not look long or leggy. The second plant is actually also a Dracaena, but we doesn't count it as a Dracaena. What I mean is this. This is the snake plant, formerly known as the Sanseveria trifasciata, in this case selanica. However, a couple of years ago it was actually added to the Dracaena family. So now it's Dracaena trifasciata selanica. However, we still consider this as a Sanseveria because it's quite different from all of the other types of Dracaenas. But one thing that it is amazing for is low light conditions. However, you need to know that when you place it somewhere where it gets, and this can be placed very, very dark and still survive. However, what will happen is it will slow down its growth to almost zero. It will take forever for it to grow new shoots. And when they do grow new shoots, what will happen is that the new shoots will become very, very thin. And also when they eventually start to push out that growth, it will also be quite thin on top as well. So know that. And if you see that it is too thin for your taste, if you wanted it to be thicker, then know that you have to place it somewhere where it gets more light. Another thing concerning the Sanseveria, or now Dracaena, is that if you place it in a dark spot, make sure that it is bone dry before you water it again. Because if you don't, then the roots will start to dissipate. It will start to just disappear. And all of a sudden you just notice that these nice leaves here just starts to fall like this. And it's because the roots are almost gone. So you need to have it bone dry before you water it again. The third plant is, of course, what some people call the king or the queen of low light placements. And that is, of course, the CC plant, or the Zamioculcas zamiifolia. There are different varieties of this plant as well. All of them can handle low light placements. And I really mean that, can handle low light placements, because it actually wants quite a lot of light. If you want it to grow quickly, if you want it to become very thick and large, you have to have it somewhere where it gets a lot of light. Not direct sunlight, but a lot of light. But if you place it somewhere where it's very, very dark, it will still survive, but the growth will become almost zero. It will take forever for it to grow. Now, in Swedish, this plant is actually called garderobsblomma. Now, translated to English, it means approximately closet flower or wardrobe flower, meaning and hinting on just that it is the king or queen of low light placements. We actually tried this almost, I think, 10 or 15 years ago. When it arrived here in Sweden, we heard the name and said we have to try it. So we actually placed this in a wardrobe or in a closet. And then we didn't do anything for up to 6 months. And what happened was, the plant was still alive. It had started to grow out new shoots. It was bone dry, of course, but it was still alive. What happened though, and you need to take a look at this, and what happened was that the new shoots that came, they were very, very, very light in color. And that is, of course, because in the closet, it didn't get any light. And if it doesn't get any light, it cannot photosynthesize properly. That means that the chlorophyll within the leaves starts to disappear and they become light green, almost white. So, what can we learn from this? Well, we can learn that it will survive almost anything as long as you don't water it too much or place it somewhere where it's too dark. So, if you notice that the new shoots or new leaves of your CC plant, they are very light in color, and as they develop, they stay light in color. Then move your CC plant somewhere where it gets more light, so that you make sure that the new leaves become dark green. The fourth plant we have here in the studio is the Philodendron Scandens, also known as the heart-leaved philodendron. And it looks like this. This can also be placed very dark, and it will survive, it will grow, a little bit slower, but it will still grow. However, if you place it really dark, the new leaves will never become large. And the heart-shaped philodendron can actually get really big leaves. Bigger than this one as well. It can become really big. But in order for them to be that big, you have to give it lots of light. So what you're sacrificing by placing it in a really dark spot is the size of the leaf. Otherwise, it will grow, it will continue to thrive, but you will get smaller leaves. And if you notice that the leaves are teeny tiny, then you have to give it more light. The fifth plant is one of our dark placement favorites, and that is the Scindapsus Pictus, also known as the satin pothos, or the satin vine, I think it's called as well. This is actually the king or queen of low light placements, because in our over 20 years experience of taking care of plants, this is the plant that we can place the darkest without it failing on you. Only thing you need to know when you place it really dark is that the leaves will become, like this one here, quite small. This is actually my own plant I have in my own home, and it's placed really dark. It thrives, it grows. However, the leaves stay this small. They can actually become quite larger, but when you have it in a low light placement, they will stay small. Now, as you've noticed here, since it's my own plant, it's actually placed in a self-watering container, like this. And I have it like this for two reasons. First of all, I don't have the time to water my plants at home as often as I would like to. So I have almost all of my plants in self-watering containers. That means that I only need to water them around once a month. So if you have a plant that is placed in a very dark spot, this is also a plant that needs and wants to dry up quite a lot in between watering. Isn't that a problem when you have it in a self-watering container that should have water all the time? Well, I do like this. I actually water on top of the pomace here, on top of the soil. As soon as I hear that the excess water starts to go through the small holes in the bottom here, down into the water reservoir, as soon as I hear that small drip, I stop watering it. So I only have a small amount of water in the bottom here. Then I wait almost a month. Then I water it again. This means that yes, I have it in a self-watering container, but I'm not using it as that because I don't have water all the time in the container in the bottom here. Number 6 on our list is the wax vine, or the porcelain flower, also known as the Hoya. This is the Hoya australis, and in our experience this can also be placed in a very dark spot. It will still continue to grow. As you will notice is that when it grows, it will actually grow towards the light. So the new shoots will always be pointing towards the light. What we do is that we cut off a lot of the long new vines because we don't want it to be too heavy so that it will fall over. At least in this case when we have it on this round shape like this. Now, if you use a Hoya in a very dark spot, we recommend you to use either the Australis, which is this one, or the Carnosa variety, because they will handle it better than the other types of Hoyas and the variegated types. If you have a variegated Hoya, it's our recommendation that you give it a lot of light. The seventh variety is the Aglonema, also known as the Chinese Evergreen. This is the Aglonema commutatum Silver Bay. This is our favorite Aglonema and the one we use a lot. The reasons are simple, because this is a variety that keeps its variegated nice color, even if you place it somewhere where it doesn't get a lot of light. So this is a perfect low light plant. Now, in nature, aglonemas actually grow underneath a very thick canopy of big trees and other bushes, so it doesn't get a lot of light. That doesn't mean that it is in low light conditions. However, this is a plant that can handle low light conditions. If you want the strongest and best variety for a low light placement, we recommend you to use the Maria. The last recommendation we have for a low light placement is the Epipremnum aureum, more commonly known as the Pothos. This is one of the most popular plants in the world. And the reasons are simple. It's easy to grow, it's easy to care for, and it can be placed almost anywhere in your home, meaning that it can also be placed in low light conditions. However, you need to know that it will not grow as fast if you place it somewhere where it's dark. And what will happen is that this type of very, very nice variegated color on the leaves will actually convert and become dark green like this if it doesn't get a lot of light. So if you want the variegated variety of Epipremnum, make sure it gets a lot of light. If that doesn't matter to you, you can place it really, really dark, but know that it will become completely green. Now, if you've stayed this long watching this video, I promised you a bonus tip. And this is a plant that might not, no matter where you read about it, you will never see that they recommend you to place it somewhere where it gets low light. However, it is our experience that it can be placed quite dark. And that is the Ficus Elastica Rubusta, also known as the rubber plant. Now, this variety of rubber plant is actually called Abidjan. I think in other places in the world it's also called Burgundy. But it is the rubber plant. Now, our experience is that it can actually be placed quite dark. If you do that, just make sure that you never water it too much. Because this is a plant that if you have it in very high light conditions, it's extremely easy. Because if you water it a little bit too much, or if you don't water it enough, you won't even notice. It will just stay the same. It might not grow as fast, but it will look nice either way. But if you place it somewhere darker, it will not be that easy. And usually what happens is if you have it in a low light condition, if you notice that the older leaves starts to drop off without any warning, it has been looking great, it has actually been growing, but all of a sudden it just starts to drop the bottom leaves or the older leaves. Know that that is an indication that it hasn't gotten enough light. So if that happens, make sure to move your rubber plant to a lighter spot. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps our channel a lot. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do. Hit the bell as well so you get a notification every time we put up something new. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. But until next time, hej då!